Hey, it's Cliff, and this video is going to be a little bit controversial, especially when it comes to Bitcoin and people that are into libertarian ideas. So if that's not your thing, that's cool. This video is probably going to get me demonetized anyway because of the topics, but that's okay. Sometimes it's not all about the AdSense, it's about doing it for the fun of it. So I want to take you back to 2021, and specifically to the Bitcoin Miami 2021 conference. Now, if you're not familiar with what these Bitcoin conferences are, it's just a way for people that are really into Bitcoin to get together. They can connect, they can talk about things that are happening in Bitcoin. They have it's a big event, usually lasts a couple of days. People go, they get food, and then there's all of these different public speakers, people who are like building on Bitcoin and innovating, and what direction are we gonna go in when it comes to Bitcoin? So this one in particular was a little bit weird. It was kind of like this mix of it being a party in Miami while also being business, and they tried to mesh it together with poor audio issues and public speakers that weren't really that great for introductions or just in general. But then they also had like the big wigs of the crypto industries coming in and talking about what their specific tech is going to do and how they're integrating Bitcoin. So it's just odd that they crammed all this together to me. It just led to it starting off very weird. They also probably could have got some security in there because it led to this famous incident right here that I'm gonna play for you.
So we're really excited about the progress of LDK.
Everybody, we have a very urgent announcement.
All right, I don't know what to...
Yeah. I'm right.
All right, that was not part of our...
Are we going to talk about Doge or not?
We did not prepare that one.
All right. I see that both Jack and I get the treatment of a surprise, but
Now, sometimes things like that you can't really avoid. Even if they did have security, this guy's gonna jump out on stage really quickly and they can't really stop him. But when you have things like this go viral, you're not bringing credit to the cryptocurrency industry, which is the whole point of having this conference, in my opinion. You're trying to get big regulators on board, especially at a time like 2021. Crypto was not having a good reputation in that time. So, and some would argue that crypto still doesn't have a very good reputation, which is why it's limiting inflow of cash into this new market. We've all heard the tired phrase that, oh, Bitcoin, it's only used for drugs on the black market. You know, it's not really anything, it's for criminals, right? And I feel like that's something that we are trying to move away from. We don't want that as a reputation. We want people to actually see the good that Bitcoin can do, obviously. So who did they bring in for their main guest at Bitcoin Miami? Well, they brought in a criminal. And even the introduction to this seemed kind of weird. They brought up this guy who's clearly has like a California accent, who, you know, his stage presence wasn't really that great. Nothing against him. I'm sure he did his best.
I want to introduce Peter Chihuahua from the Bitcoin Magazine team.
Thank you, David. So this is, you know, we've had so much awesome content today. We've been able to cover so many amazing stories about Bitcoin at Bitcoin.
So we got all this amazing content, guys. This is gonna be really great. I shouldn't do that. I'm a horrible person.
Magazine over the years, but this really is something that's truly special. So I want to thank you guys for being here. And I really think this deserves, this audience deserves a ton of attention. So I've prepared a statement here to kind of set it up before we play it for you guys. Like many of you out there, I'm sure, the first real world application I had ever heard of in Bitcoin was called Silk Road. It was launched in 2011. It was a website accessible through an IP address obscuring software where users could buy and sell things in a censorship-resistant and free way.
So this is where it gets controversial. This is where I don't agree with them bringing him on as a guest. So like I said before, we were in a situation where most people believe Bitcoin is only used for drugs. So they're going to highlight the Silk Road, Bitcoin's supposed first use case, right? At a big conference where you're going to have people coming in, different corporations who might want to actually invest into infrastructure or building different you know, avenues for Bitcoin utility, things that we actually need, regulators that are going to help us actually use this kind of stuff. And so what we're doing here is we're highlighting Silk Road. This guy talks about Silk Road like it was actually good. What people actually used Silk Road for was to buy drugs. That's, you know, it's not debatable. It was a online drug market where people could buy drugs, people bought guns, and in some cases people bought hitmen. It was a black market. It was a black market for Bitcoin. And that's the thing that we're gonna highlight at this Bitcoin conference, is that people were using this to buy drugs. Now, I get it. Most people that like Bitcoin, they are libertarians. They think that people should be able to do what they want. They should be able to, you know, it's my body. If I wanna buy drugs with it, I can do whatever I want. And to some extent, I get it. I can see your point. You know, arrest on people that are known drug users typically lead to them being readmitted to jail, and it becomes a revolving door, and it doesn't really help. The war on drugs has absolutely not worked. I'm with you. But when it comes to these libertarian policies that we should just let everybody do drugs, that doesn't work either. And we actually test piloted it a couple years ago in America, and I can show you that here. Here's a news story from 4 days ago.
The governor of Oregon has declared an emergency for the city of Portland just a few years after it became the first state in the nation to largely decriminalize drug use. Very interesting story here. There had been hope that a more humane approach could help curb addiction overall, but it hasn't worked out that way, at least so far. Adam Yamaguchi of CBS Reports shows us that many people are running out of patience.
The state, the county, and city declare a fentanyl state of emergency.
The state of Oregon appears to be taking a new approach in addressing the opioid crisis plaguing its largest city. The 90-day emergency order for fentanyl use, issued by the governor, establishes a command center and more coordination between emergency management and health services. However, it does not include additional funding. The goal is to give the city's residents a chance against the extremely addictive opioid.
It is a drug that compels users to redose every 45 to 90 minutes. People in the throes of a fentanyl addiction can hardly walk into a clinic without having to use again.
Everyone has Narcan?
Oregon paved the way as the first state to decriminalize drug use, passing Measure 110 in 2020. Instead of incarcerating addicts, it focuses on addiction recovery.
Because you're going to call one of these numbers?
We were with Portland police last year as they handed out citations to fentanyl users in the street.
My full-time job is fentanyl, and basically all roads lead to fentanyl in downtown Portland.
But in the years since Measure 110 was passed, overdose deaths have continued to rise, prompting local leaders to call for more than just the emergency order, but the recriminalization of drug use.
We've had 3 years of this law that has not delivered on the promise that voters thought they were getting.
Now, as you can see, complete decriminalization is probably not the answer, the same way as the war on drugs is probably not the answer as well. In reality, it's probably somewhere in the middle, and we just kind of haven't came to that conclusion yet of where we draw the line. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about Bitcoin. So basically, they took this guy who was the founder of the Silk Road, and they had him call in from prison to kind of plead his case. He's trying to get out of prison. Now, he is serving 2 life sentences as well as, I believe, 40 years, 20 or 40 years. I'm not quite sure exactly. And sure, in some instances, that is kind of extreme. 1 life sentence, probably enough, or maybe a little bit less. I don't know. Let me know what you think he could have got down below in the comments. This is where the real controversy kind of starts. So just to put this in perspective, I have an article here. This is from the FBI, and it says the Silk Road generated hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, more than $13 million worth of Bitcoin in commissions. On November 3rd, 2020, law enforcement seized over $1 billion worth of digital currency from the case. So they had around $1 billion circulating into this black market sales trade. Again, just putting this in perspective, I have an article from the New York Times talking about El Chapo, who is obviously a well-known international gangster, right? And they say from the early 1990s until his arrest in 2016, the prosecutor said Mr. Guzman handled nearly 600,000 kilograms of cocaine worth more than $11 billion, 200 kilograms of heroin worth more than $11 million, and at least 420 kilograms of marijuana worth about $846 million. So the total for that is around $12.5 billion. A little bit over, but we'll just say $12.5 billion. So this start out trade on the Silk Road, this guy who created this website was circulating $1 billion, let's say, according to the FBI, compared to El Chapo, who was doing about 12.5 billion. So just putting the numbers in perspective, that this was not some kind of like, oh, he sold some weed to his friends. No, this was a big deal. This was a circulating supply of drugs going through on a black market. They were calling this the Amazon of narcotics. So I'm gonna play you a little bit of his phone call from prison that they played at the Bitcoin conference, where he's trying to plead his case. I'm not a bad guy, you know, I'm actually good. I'm here supporting Bitcoin, you know, I'm here because of Bitcoin, right? He's not here because of Bitcoin. I don't think this guy really cares about Bitcoin. He sees this as a end to our community of Bitcoiners to hopefully get free. And at the time, I think people fell for this, and they probably still do. Again, comment down below and tell me what you think.
Hello, this is Ulbricht. Calling you today from prison, from a maximum security federal penitentiary. We don't have much time together today, and I don't know if I'll get another chance to talk to you like this. I'll say as much as I can, but when it's time to go, I'll have to hang up and go back to my cell. I have lost my freedom. That's what I want to talk to you about today. I want you to understand what it means to lose your freedom. But first, let's talk about Bitcoin. I was there during Bitcoin's early days. Back then, Bitcoin made me feel like anything was possible. Bitcoin was open to everyone, right? That's what I love so much about it. It was like it leveled the playing field. When the idea of Bitcoin really clicked for me, I got so excited. I thought, with Bitcoin, I can try to do something that actually makes a difference. It may sound kind of corny, but to me, we're all one big family.
So you can see he's really trying to manipulate the people in the audience. We're one big family. Now, please help my case. Get me out of prison right now.
Silk Road was a website I made when I was 26 years old, more than a decade ago now. It used Tor and Bitcoin to protect people's privacy. I called it an anonymous market. At the time, I thought, if Bitcoin makes payments anonymous and private, then what are we waiting for? Why are we sitting around talking about it?
Several times during this interview, they highlight that he's 26 years old, and they do it in a way to minimize what he did. And they do it to say, oh, he was this young kid, he didn't know any better. But bro, you're 26 years old. If you're 26 years old and you don't know not to sell drugs, I don't think anybody can help you. You're almost 30.
I was given 2 life sentences without parole, plus 40 years. I'm a nonviolent, first-time offender. But if nothing changes, I'll spend the next few decades in this cage.
He also kind of highlights that he's a non-violent criminal, which true in ways. You're not a violent criminal, but when you think of the fentanyl epidemic that's going on today, the amount of people that are dropping dead every day from getting these fentanyl overdoses, and you started the Amazon of narcotics. Imagine if the government allowed this to continue. Imagine the amount of people that would be dead because they could use something as easy as Amazon to deliver drugs to their house. How many people would be dead? How many families would you have affected? Sure, you're nonviolent, but you still did a lot of damage to the world.
My mother, this was after I was sentenced, my mother was invited to give a speaking tour in Europe. She was raising awareness about what had happened to me and was looking for help. At a talk in Poland, she started to feel a bit sick and had to fly home early. So the next morning, I called my sister from the prison, and the first thing she said was, "Has anyone told you about Mom yet?" I said, "What about her?" And she said to me in this voice, she said, "Oh, Ross. And I knew her mom had been feeling sick, and in that moment, I just knew my sister was going to This call is from a federal prison. My sister was going to tell me our mom was dead. But she said, Mom's in the hospital. And I was like, oh, thank God, she's not dead. But then I was like, wait, the hospital? That's not good either. Technically, our mother had died. Her heart stopped at the breakfast table that morning. My uncle kept it going with CPR, and she was rushed to the hospital. She was unconscious in the ICU when I called. It was a long time before I was able to talk to her, and I didn't know if she would live. We didn't know if there would be brain damage.
Now here's where things really start to get dark. Ross pulls in his grieving mother into the conversation and how she's dealing with health complications because of his actions, and he's doing this to gain sympathy. Now this to me was just disgusting, and I didn't understand how I was like the only person looking at this and going, this is just gross. Like the whole thing, like you put your mother through these actions. She clearly is in an emotional state that, you know, she wants her son back. Of course, she can't believe that her son could do these terrible things. And at that point, you really start to see his villain arc come around. It really reminded me of Breaking Bad, where, you know, Walter White originally was just a guy trying to make some money. He had cancer issues, and then it develops into this big, nasty scenario. So for those of you that don't know, Ross allegedly, it's claimed that he was hiring hitmen to silence other users of Silk Road that wanted to give up his identity. There are actual messages from Ross that shows that he is trying to do a murder for hire. Now, fortunately, the people that he was having that conversation with were a bunch of trolls, and they were just trying to make money. So no one actually died in this case, and he wasn't charged with any of those charges of murder for hire or anything like that. That had nothing to do with his case, besides maybe painting him as a bad character because of what he wanted to do. He just was very fortunate that no one actually died, and he was talking to trolls. So look, Bitcoin already has enough issues when it comes to people like Senator Warren walking around and saying that it's only used for money laundering and drugs. We don't need to take Silk Road and parade it as our main event at a Bitcoin conference. It doesn't do any good for our image. So going forward, I guess what I'm just looking at here is, can we just pick better people to bring to these conferences? Wouldn't that make more sense? Shouldn't we be bringing in these tech giants, people that are actually going to make this technology useful and do it in a decentralized way? Can we do something to move away from this bad image that we had in the beginning? That's all I'm saying. So if you guys agree with me, please comment down below. If you don't agree with me, please comment down below. But overall, thank you for watching.